Lost in Space is one of those redheaded stepchildren of science fiction, especially when you consider where it came from. The original 1965 run of the show outperformed the den-floundering Star Trek and was a staple of the cheap, pulpy adventure camp that polluted sci-fi just when it was trying to get on its feet. So it's especially strange that it keeps getting remade, picked up time and again despite being a show that is so marked by the time and place it was made in.
This cosmic glow, induced through the genius of advanced technology, will put the Robinson family and Major West in limbo.
There's something to be said, at the same time, about the importance of bad art, in the ways that its incompetence or attempted goals can be insightful and striking. I'll get to that in a second, though. So you want to reboot Lost in Space? That's fine, Stephen Hopkins in 1996. That's totes fine. Oh, and a script by Akiva Goldsman. Well, now we're cooking with fire. And we'll hire Matt LeBlanc. Hey, he's a hot commodity on Friends, and Hollywood treasure Gary Oldman. What could
Where is my money?
Go wrong
Through the planet as she's breaking up.
with that?
Don't make me wait another lifetime to know how you feel.
This is a difficult story to translate into a film to begin with. The only recurring antagonist is a malicious saboteur who is outnumbered by the ship's crew. The format of the story is inherently episodic, meaning it might feel disjointed as a movie, and there is a lot of characters to develop and introduce. But you can technically make a good movie out of anything. The issue is, Lost in Space doesn't want to be campy or goofy, even though the premise itself is so built from the components of old sci-fi. It wants to be gritty and dark, and
This Cold War just got hot.
so it's totally schizophrenic from minute one. This ain't your mom is lost in space, but the central premise is about a family on space adventures. That's absurdly hard to make cool and or gritty. If anything, it should be authentic, resting on the bond between... I'm getting carried away. Let's go through the plot first. In the future, humanity is trying to build a hyperlane to other habitable worlds. Opposing this is the terrorist organization called the Global Sedition, that wants to build their own hypergate and prevent Westerners from leaving too?
They hope to colonize Alpha Prime first. If they're successful, Western demons like you and I, Major West, will be left on Earth to die.
Which is just a very strange conflict that should have more time dedicated to it. So we have this opening scene where we establish Joey Tribbiani, Major Don, and his wingman, and literally nothing else. And title. That you can't read because this ain't your mom is lost in space, and we're trying extremely hard to make this avant-garde. So we've got Will Robinson and the mom and iCarly with some really stunning editing choices. Like, here we're supposed to cut into the next scene, and instead we get a cut back into the previous scene, and then back into the next scene. It's just absurdly disorienting. I'd like to think they're going for some kind of hyper-informational style or something, but I'm not seeing it at all. Joey Tribbiani is selected as the Robinsons' pilot during their expedition to save humanity.
It's a babysitting job, sir.
Meanwhile, Dr. Smith, an agent for the Global Sedition, has to break on board the Robinson ship before it launches and kill the Robinson family. He's introduced like this.
Where is my money?
And he's written like this.
Forgive me if I forgo to kiss when sleeping with your mother, but the time has come to awake.
So he's a real fun guy, definitely not overwritten at all, nor not even an actual person I can believe exists. He's like this floating archetypal villain cloud. Oh, this sounds evil to say and hard to understand, let's throw that in the script.
I can't stop this infernal contraction on my own.
Don is introduced to Judy Robinson and he hits on her in front of her father, and then tells John that he would love to bang his daughter.
That's one cold fish I'd love to thaw.
Which is never brought up again or mentioned. Like, excuse me? Why are you saying you want to bang my daughter? Like, how is that acceptable? What the fuck? So we go into space and the spaceship breaks apart and then we're blasting off and then the robot that was tampered with earlier comes out and tries to kill everyone. Smith stowed away on the ship by accident and now he's being killed by a robot and he has to wake up the Robinsons to save himself. But it's here where the movie both tries and fails to articulate its philosophical underpinnings. Or rather, I think it does?
Do not mistake my deception for a character flaw. It is a philosophical choice. A profound understanding of the universe. It is a way of life.
You're a monster.
Perhaps.
Smith talking about how much of a monster he is does not constitute an actual ethos or motivating idea. I mean, so far he's behaved in a way I'd call objectivist, but the movie doesn't actually give us any meat. It's almost entirely devoid of actual commentary or themes because its characters' motivations are either incredibly shallow or not articulated at all. This is just flat out empty screenwriting.
I put a little heart into it. The life I saved may be my own.
Thanks, Smith. We could tell. We're watching the movie. The family has to go into hyperspace because they're about to fly into the sun. At the last moment, Dawn activates the hyperdrive and flies through the sun, and now they're lost in space. Yay. They find a ship that is infested with terrifying bug creatures that, I mean... This movie's for kids, right? Like, we're putting alien knockoffs in our kids' movie? Kids love body horror in the 90s. Okay, got it, thanks. Okay, we need to back this up. Who is this movie for, genuinely? Is this for kids? The set design is cartoony, the script is as deep as a puddle, and now we have genuinely horrifying bug monsters crawling around. We at least get the film's thesis line here.
Like the drip, drip, drip of blood.
You really need to shut up.
Thanks, Joey from Friends. Then they explode the ship because that's what you do when a ship is full of spiders, and the shockwave throws them into a mysterious world. But there's a blizzard coming, so the plot needs to come to a standstill because the movie's not long enough. So we get a bunch of character exposition an hour and a half into the film.
I love you, wife.
And we should have gotten this at the beginning. Instead, we got penny vision, pranks, the Intel Inside theme,
Truly brilliant mind.
and a bunch of people being really grumpy at each other. That's what really makes this movie a slog. Everyone is having an abysmal time and being mad at each other for 7 different things. It's like the nadir of the story is at the beginning and the rising action is towards the end. Anyways, a time dome develops, and they mount an expedition to go inside and retrieve the energy source so they can blast off again. Dr. Smith panics again because cowardice is an unflattering trait, and if a trait is bad, Dr. Smith's gotta have it.
Run, child! Run!
John and Dawn discover the old version of Will, who is inside the time dome. I don't think I understand everything that's going on with the dome other than it's in the future and it just exists.
Look, Father, what my flights of fancy have wrought!
The script really needs to take a fiver, Christ.
It's Dr. Smith.
Hello, Doctor. How nice to see me again after all these years.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I need you to help us now, robot. Because we're friends.
Logic error. Friendship does not compute.
Great, sure. I love transhumanism out of left field in this movie. Look, I could keep going, but the crux of it is that in the time dome, a scratch that Smith acquired from the bugs ended up mutating him into a horrifying monster that is not suitable for what I think is a kid's movie. This is a kid's movie, right? The power source is retrieved, and the ship is powered on and blasts off into the night. Will activates a time portal and throws his old man back in time, and also defeats Smith. Joy Tribbiani navigates them through the planet, which is collapsing because reasons, and then they do the hyperspace thing again and cut to credits.
Cool.
You might say, Wiggleshark, this video is really meandering. Where are you going with this? Well, the issue with the movie is that it's so schizophrenic. It's got 6 different storylines going at the same time and no anchors for its story or themes. Something that really struck me about the characters is that they're deterministic. As in Will, regardless of his circumstances, will always be clever and inventive, even with 0 resources and being raised by an abusive bug monster. John will always be the leader. In fact, at a point in the story, it's implied that the Robinsons' ship explodes when they're trying to escape without him on board. Smith's character is the worst example, with literally every negative trait possible ascribed to him. He's selfish, conniving, hostile, cowardly, theatrical, sometimes in ways that contradict each other. So the film accidentally implies, I think, that people are born or cut out of a certain mold, and it's impossible to change them. Or even worse, that their invisible willpower determines the destiny of the world around them. I despise the hot and cold thing between John and Judy because it doesn't really evolve or change whatsoever throughout the film. So you have no character arcs at all, nobody changes, and they just move around and have things happen to them with no personal consequences. I've been ragging on this movie way longer than I intended to. There's just so much that's wrong with it. The video is called Lost in Space and the Importance of Bad Art. How can bad art be important, if by implication it fails at what it sets out to do? Lost in Space is a masterclass in how important a script and clear aesthetic vision is to a work. The film doesn't have a denouement because it doesn't have themes, but there's a moment towards the end where John Robinson explains something to the pilot.
Through the planet as she's breaking up, we can use the planet's gravity.
This is a very strange delivery. I don't know anything about William Hurt, but his performance tells me that he's furious that he has to execute these lines. He's in a place of such deep artistic disappointment and frustration, and it's unintentionally channeled in some of the worst dialogue of the film. The cognitive dissonance between wanting to do high sci-fi adventure with metaphysical concepts and an alternate storyline involving an apocalyptic race of parasitic space spiders is wildly striking. It goes into such places of profound psychological body horror that it communicates to any creative how important a clear and precise vision is. If you don't know what your story is about, or exactly how you want your audience to feel in a given moment, you get stuff like this.
Don't make me wait another lifetime to know how you feel.
Don's excellent one-liners are drowned out by the awful dialogue around him, and his own occasional stinkers. Penny doesn't get a storyline to speak of. Will doesn't have an arc even though he's constantly inventing and modifying things. I don't mean to say that bad art is inherently diagnostic, but it'll teach you way more about the way a film is supposed to work, rather than a good movie whose parts are invisible. Bad art is naked. It reveals more about the author than skilled art because it's nothing but incoherent intent. The failures of the story and trying to mine out the good portions of it, and work from those to reverse engineer a working story is an incredible learning process. Hell, maybe one day someone will figure out how to reboot Lost in Space the right way, and this abject mess will help them get there. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Keep swimming, and have a good one.